Live shots of Bernie Sanders. He's, of course, in Iowa. That's where the campaign really begins. He's speaking to a big crowd there. A lot of the enthusiasm for Bernie seems not to have diminished whatsoever in the past 4 years. He's starting it again. Let's bring back our political panel to talk about all this. Dan Hayworth, Jenna Ellis, Rochelle Ritchie. Rochelle, it's ironic. We go from live shots from Venezuela, where socialism has destroyed one of the richest countries in the world, to a shot of Bernie Sanders, who's very hesitant about criticizing any socialist country, whether it's Venezuela, Cuba, or wherever.
Yeah, I think if you're looking at what's happening in Venezuela, it's really a disservice not to criticize what you're seeing happening to the people there. But I think that, America has this notion that the sort of socialism that we see in Venezuela simply cannot happen in the United States. I think that a lot of people are very confident that we're not going to get to the point of our electricity being out across the country. We're not going to get to the point of people eating out of the back of garbage trucks. But when you look at, what's happening, it is very hard to sort of support the socialist idea. And then you have people like Bernie Sanders sort of coming out and toting that idea. Yeah. But I think the difference that we have to make is we have to make sure that that we have to separate the policies of Bernie Sanders from the policies that are happening in Venezuela.
The problem is, though, Nan, that as far as it's early yet since the election, but there already are policies that have come out from the socialist contingent within the Democratic Party that Democratic presidential hopefuls have signed on to.
Oh, precisely. And I agree, Rochelle, I thought your comments were very perceptive and spot on. There likely would be a difference in the way in which a socialist bent would be observed in the United States versus Venezuela. But let's posit this as a given always. When we favor government, when we confer resources on government, they will not be as productive. They won't produce as much wealth and prosperity as they do when we leave them in the hands of the citizens. So to whatever degree we give government more power than it should have, and I would argue, as many will, that the Democratic presidential field is arguing for massive transfer of resources and power to the federal government. And even if we don't end up as Venezuela, we will end up less prosperous than we should be. And that's a sad thing that we don't have to experience.
Well, Jenna, the president of the United States clearly thinks, and actually Fox News polls have backed him up on this, that Americans don't like the word socialism. They don't like what it implies. They don't like what it means in policy, even if it's put under the rubric of Democrat socialism, like they've had in certain countries in Europe. Most of them, by the way, have rejected them after having tried it and it failed there. So, to the extent that the president uses that word socialism, says these are socialist policies, do you think he'll have success with voters?
Absolutely, because Americans still have a healthy fear of socialism and what it implies. And we've seen through the Democrat progressive agenda that they've done this through incremental means. And that's really the fear here, is to say if we are foreclosing the ability of American citizens who have the opportunity to say we have limited power to our federal government, we can decide and self-govern. That's what our American Constitution was built upon, was this idea that our rights are given by God, our Creator, not by our government, and we only tell the government what limited power it can have. And so when we talk about even democratic socialism, that's really no different, no matter what we actually see in the United States. The incrementalist approach, 30 years ago, we would have never seen same-sex marriage, the infringement on religious freedom. We have to make sure that we don't get to socialism.
I want to switch gears a bit, Rochelle, because one of the new congresswomen who leans in that socialist direction, Ilhan Omar is her name. She has actually come out with all kinds of misstatements about what she has meant with regard to a recent controversy in which she specifically called out President Obama for doing some of the things that President Trump has done with regard to immigrants, with regard to treating Israel or the Palestinians, et cetera. She backtracked or she said that she hadn't actually said things, and then when we got the tape, turned out she really had said. Where does all this go?
I think that these freshman Congress members have got to be more careful. I think a lot of them are putting themselves into these very sloppy situations because they're ego has sort of gotten in the way of them understanding that when you come on the Hill, I worked on the Hill, you have to humble yourself. You can't just come up there and just start running the show, having protests inside of the Speaker's office.
But she's actually, forgive me for interrupting, she's actually on the Foreign Affairs Committee, and she's going to be getting privileged information, communiques. Some people are worried that because of her intentions, she may share those private things with the wrong people.
I'm not sure that we really understand what her intentions are. And I think that if you're concerned about her being on the Foreign Affairs Committee, you're almost associating her with being, someone that's corrupt or someone that's a terrorist in a sense. I mean, they had that billboard at that West Virginia Republican meeting of her associating her photo with 9/11.
But Dan, very quickly, we only have 15 seconds. The fact that she will have sensitive information dealing with Israel, and we know how she feels about Israel, is that of a concern to you?
I think it should give us pause. She's duly elected. She has the right to speak. But I agree that handling that kind of sensitive information becomes a responsibility of the Democratic leadership in the House. And Speaker Pelosi has been all too compliant so far with
Ladies, we got to leave it at that. We have